Hello YouTube, it is I, Vincent, back again with yet another guitar video. And today we are going to be talking about one of the most influential guitar players to ever exist in all time, John Petrucci. Now this was originally just going to be another one in my series on how XYZ guitarists changed the XYZ brand. But then I started thinking about it. I don't think John Petrucci just changed music, man. I think John Petrucci might have perfected the modern metal guitar formula. I mean, take a look at what all the modern guitar players are using on TikTok and Instagram nowadays. They're just using modern S-style guitars with 24 frets, 2-point trems, and humbuckers. They're using guitars like the Charvel DK24, and they're using guitars like the Ibanez AZ. Even when you look at the new guitarists that are popping up and creating their signature guitars like Polyphia or Aaron Marshall or Jason Richardson, they're all functionally just JP clones with a little bit of their own little artistry on top. And the craziest thing to me is that John Petrucci basically was doing this 20 years ago, before it was cool, before anybody was doing it, and nobody really talks about this. I like to call this archetype of guitar the sleeper Strat, kind of taking cues from car culture, you know, sleeper cars, sleeper Strat, supercars, super Strat, you get the idea. A guitar that looks pretty traditional and conservative, but secretly has all the high-end modern performances that you would really want in a modern guitar. And this entire trend of the sleeper Strat pretty much all starts with John Petrucci's 2004 Music Man signature guitar. I would say the formula for this guitar would be a traditional Strat type silhouette, not too pointy like an RG. It has to have 24 frets and it has to have a thin, fast shredder neck. It can be colorful, but the colors are usually too flashy. I mean, look at the more muted pinks compared to the more bright neon pinks of the guitars in the 80s. Traditionally has dual humbucker high output pickups, but this isn't a hard rule. There are tons of these guitars that also have hum single, get the idea. But it has to have a humbucker in the bridge at the very least. It needs to be more ergonomic than your typical Strat. And I would say the #1 key defining feature of a sleeper Strat is having a 2-point floating tremolo. Not a Floyd Rose, not a double locking trem, just a traditional 2-point trem, but it's floating. It's a guitar that looks like it could be used at a jazz gig, but could absolutely handle the most extreme genres of metal. I mean, take a look at Chelsea Grin. But let's talk about why John Petrucci designed this guitar in the first place. Before John Petrucci was with Music Man, he was with Ibanez, and he had his JPM models. And these guitars were right at home with your traditional 80s Super Strats. They were bright, bold, had these crazy graphics on it, had a Floyd Rose, 2 humbuckers. It's a guitar that unironically would look totally at home in Motley Crue. But by the early 2000s, he wanted something a little bit different, a little bit more understated. In interviews around the launch of his Music Man signature, Petrucci explained that he wanted a guitar that felt more organic and classic in appearance, but still had all the modern performance features that he would need. He stated specifically that he wanted a smaller body, better balance, a more comfortable trem system, and a sleeker, more refined look. He switched to Ernie Ball from Ibanez because they were willing to create an entirely new body from scratch and not just modify an existing body design like the RG. This is a really funny thing because Polyphia left Music Man for Ibanez because Ibanez let Polyphia help design the AZ, which was their brand new shape, and Music Man wouldn't let them make a shape. It's like the opposite situation with Polyphia. Anyways, I digress, back to the main topic at hand. Unlike his JPM signature, his Music Man signature had more rounded contours, more traditional shape, had no locking nut, and it had a brand new custom 2-point trem system. He ultimately switched away from Floyd Rose because he liked the tuning stability and the flexibility of a 2-point trem, but still wanted it to be floating because he wanted to pull upwards on the bar. And again, I think the use of these types of trems is ultimately what makes a sleeper Strat a sleeper Strat. When the JP6 launched in 2004, it didn't look extreme. Didn't really look like a typical metal guitar at the time, especially compared to the other Super Strats in the 2000s, like the Hellraisers. It was a lot more refined and it was a lot more minimalistic, and it certainly attracted a whole lot of metalcore players and deathcore players and progressive players in the 2010s. And speaking of which, fast forward to the 2010s and the Music Man JP is quite literally everywhere. They have an entire tent at Warped Tour dedicated to playing these guitars. Whether you were a deathcore band like Chelsea Grin, a metalcore band like Born of Osiris, a prog band like Periphery, or a band like Polyphia, it doesn't matter. If you were one of the big modern metal bands in the 2010s, you probably played a JP at one point or another in your music career. These guitars ultimately became synonymous with tight rhythm playing, progressive technicality, and extreme versatility that no other guitars could match. And it very quietly became the blueprint for the modern metal guitar tone. We had an entire generation of Gen Z guitarists growing up on YouTube, myself included, that were watching all these bands playing these guitars. It became something aspirational, and I think it's really, really funny that so many other guitarists helped make John Petrucci's signature guitar so iconic. Now, I also want to make one thing very abundantly clear before I go forward in this video. John Petrucci didn't invent this archetype of modern S-type performance guitars. Obviously, we had companies like Sir and Tom Anderson making guitars like this, and even Ibanez was experimenting with the Andy Timmons model back in the day. But here's the difference between a Music Man and something like a Sir or a Tom Anderson. Those were extremely niche and boutique level instruments, whereas the Music Man was a lot more attainable. Expensive, but they were a lot more able to mass produce the guitar, bring it to the market, and put it on arena stages globally. And it also helps that it's attached to probably one of the most influential guitarists to ever grace the earth. So I don't want to say that John Petrucci wholly invented this archetype of guitar, but I will say that he popularized it. But now let's take a look at what happened after all of it. Brands started recognizing something. People were playing these John Petrucci guitars, and all these little Gen Z kids wanted John Petrucci guitars, but none of the little Gen Z kids had $2,000 to $3,000 to spend on a John Petrucci model. There was a huge gap in the market for a sub $2,000 guitar of this type, which in my head is so crazy. Like, how have we gone this long without having a sub $2,000 guitar? But I digress. Ultimately, young guitarists wanted that JP look, the modern specs, the traditional silhouette, the high performance, but at a more reasonable price point. So companies responded. Enter Ibanez and enter Charvel with the AZ and the DK24, which I think we would all agree are probably the two most popular of this archetype of instrument. These guitars follow the exact same formula. Traditional super strat shape that's more ergonomic, 2-point trem that's floating, high output pickups, 24 frets, more refined aesthetics. We finally have the affordable sleeper strats, but it's not just people's favorite artists that make the sleeper strat archetype so popular. There are so many reasons why people would like this guitar. It's pretty mature looking, doesn't look crazy like a BC Rich, it can work in multiple genres and look totally natural. It doesn't really feel like a gimmick compared to a lot of the other modern metal guitar trends like multi-scale or headless or what have you. It's a guitar that I feel blends metal with other genres very, very well, and I also believe it avoids a lot of the now dated 2000s super strat aesthetics. Again, calling out the Hellraiser as much as I love it. The Gen Z players don't want the pointy guitars that are all black with the abalone and the active pickups. They want versatility, they want aesthetics, and they want performance. And John Petrucci was doing this 20 years ago. And ultimately, I don't think this trend is gonna go anywhere. I think we're gonna see more artists adopt this shape. Like I mentioned before, Polyphia, Jason Richardson, Sean, Intervals, all their signature guitars are functionally just JP clones at the end of the day. And every year that goes by, we see more artists making their own take on this, more mid-tier brands refining the formula and putting their own takes on this, and more affordable versions hitting the market, giving more competition and more things for people to choose from. So next time you're scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and you see somebody holding their shell pink Charvel DK24, just remember that all of that traces back to John Petrucci one day in the 2000s being like, I don't want to be with Ibanez anymore. So what do you guys think? Did John Petrucci help popularize the sleeper strat trend, or is this something that ultimately would have happened anyways? Be sure to drop your thoughts down below in the comments section, and if you liked this video or learned anything, feel free to leave a like or a subscribe. It certainly helps me out immensely. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.